On 8 March 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, a Boeing 777-200ER registered 9M-MRO, departed Kuala Lumpur for Beijing with 239 people on board. Routine radio contact ended that night, and within hours, the aircraft had left civil radar coverage, while military radar later showed it deviated from its filed track. What followed is unprecedented: a coordinated international search, partial debris finds years later, and an investigation that still has no definitive, publicly accepted explanation. This shocked the aviation industry because a large, modern, twin-engine airliner, built with multiple redundancies and designed to be forensically recoverable, effectively disappeared in the 21st century airspace system. For airlines, manufacturers, and regulators, MH370 exposed uncomfortable gaps in real-time tracking, ocean recovery capabilities, and how we interpret sparse telemetry. That's why this case still matters to operations and safety programs worldwide. To follow the investigation, we need to stitch together 3 strands of evidence: radar and ATC records, satellite telecommunication metadata, and the physical debris that later washed ashore. The narrative begins with normal departure procedures from Kuala Lumpur. Shortly after transfer to Ho Chi Minh ATC and a routine Goodnight Malaysian 370 call, the aircraft's secondary surveillance transponder went dark. Military primary radar later showed an unplanned turn across the Malay Peninsula. Then the track ended. The initial absence of a confirmed impact site turned this into a protracted search problem of unprecedented scale. A second crucial strand was the aircraft's interaction with the Inmarsat satellite network. While the aircraft stopped sending routine ACARS updates and stopped responding to SSR interrogations, its Satellite Data Unit, SDU, continued low-bandwidth log-on exchanges with Inmarsat for hours, short pings that carried timing and Doppler characteristics, but not location data. Inmarsat engineers and independent experts used those pings to derive possible distance arcs from the satellite, most famously the so-called 7th arc, which constrained where the airplane could have been at the time of the last handshake. Those arcs are probabilistic constraints, not GPS coordinates, and they defined where later searches would focus. Finally, in 2015 and afterward, pieces of debris identified as coming from a Boeing 777 began to appear on western Indian Ocean shores, the first physical confirmation that wreckage had reached land. Oceanographic drift modeling by organizations including CSIRO used debris timing and the ocean currents to narrow likely source regions along the southern arc. But those drift models still leave wide uncertainty. Debris proves an Indian Ocean outcome, not an exact impact point. Primary and secondary radar tell different stories. Secondary surveillance radar depends on the aircraft's transponder to reply with identity and altitude. Primary radar detects a physical return without cooperation. MH370's transponder stopped transmitting, removing the civil traffic picture, while military primary radar later logged an uncooperative track turning west across the Malay Peninsula. Those primary radar returns established that the aircraft did not continue on its published airway to Beijing. Instead, it deviated significantly. Primary radar tracks can, however, not follow an aircraft indefinitely over vast ocean areas. So beyond a point, the radar evidence ends, and the satellite arcs become the only technical trace. Here's how this works. When the flight's SDU periodically handshook with an Inmarsat satellite, the ground station recorded the time and frequency characteristics of each exchange. Inmarsat engineers and independent experts used those pings to derive possible distance arcs from a satellite, most famously the so-called 7th arc, which constrained where the airplane could have been at the time of the last handshake. Those arcs are probabilistic constraints, not GPS coordinates, and they defined where later searches would focus. Crucially, the handshake analysis provides timing and range constraints, and with Doppler, some heading, speed, likelihoods, but not a point location. That probabilistic nature is why the searches were enormous, and why a precise impact coordinate was never offered by the satellite data alone. The available data permit multiple broad scenarios: catastrophic mechanical failure, a gradual loss of power and glide to the Southern Ocean, depressurization and incapacitation of crew, or intentional diversion. Here's the analyst's rule. Evidence constrains, but rarely proves. Fuel and endurance modeling based on Boeing 777-200ER performance figures show the aircraft could plausibly have reached the southern arcs prior to fuel exhaustion, assuming it continued to fly for hours after transponder loss. But endurance calculations alone cannot discriminate between controlled diversion and a powerless glide. Satellite pings show the aircraft's SDU remained powered long after secondary radar silence, which suggests the aircraft was intact enough for its SDU to operate, but not necessarily intact enough to provide conclusive cause. That is the crux. We have fragments of telemetry and some debris. We lack the machine precision of flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder to tell a complete story. Beginning in 2015, debris confirmed or strongly linked to a Boeing 777 began to be found on western Indian Ocean shores, most notably the flaperon found on Reunion Island. Laboratory identification and part numbers confirmed the origin of some items. CSIRO's drift modeling and experimental tank testing with sample flaperons helped translate where debris might have come from along the southern arc, producing probability cones and narrowing search boxes. But ocean drift is chaotic. Wind, storms, object buoyancy, and time adrift all amplify uncertainty. Debris proves that pieces from the aircraft entered the Indian Ocean and reached shore, but it does not, by itself, produce a wreckage point or a cause. Searching on the deep ocean floor is not like searching land. High-resolution side-scan sonar, towed vehicles, and autonomous underwater vehicles map the seabed in grid patterns, returning sonar anomalies that must be visually confirmed. The area defined by the seventh arc spans tens of thousands of square kilometers. Even modern AUV fleets map only tens to hundreds of square kilometers per week at high resolution. The 2014-2017 multinational search mapped very large areas but did not find the main wreckage. Private operators later proposed concentrated searches using improved AUVs. Ocean Infinity eventually signed a no-find, no-fee arrangement to search a 15,000 square kilometer area with a $70 million incentive if the wreckage were located, a model that reflects both technological capability and commercial risk. Weather, seabed complexity, and the practical limits of continuous survey are why finding the wreck in deep ocean is so hard. First, real-time tracking and redundancy. Regulators in the industry accelerated efforts to close the "where are they" gap when aircraft fly over ocean. Space-based ADS-B and proposals for more frequent, automated position reporting gained traction because MH370 showed that positional silence can leave huge investigative voids. The case reframed expectations. The industry moved from "we track routinely" to "we should track continuously." Second, search and recovery economics and private sector role. The extraordinary multi-nation search that followed, among the most expensive in aviation history, and later private contracts, illustrated that deep ocean searches require specialist robotics and substantial funding. Ocean Infinity's commercial model signaled that private capital and technology can supplement state searches, but also that commercial arrangements come with constraints and weather windows. The headline $70 million incentive underlines the scale of costs required for credible deep ocean discovery. Third, investigative and legal ramifications. Families sought answers over years, and governments reviewed how investigative conclusions are shared and how victims' families are engaged. Insurers and operators took note. An unresolved disappearance has long financial tails. Compensation, litigation, and the reputational cost to an airline can last decades. For manufacturers, the case also amplified interest in health monitoring systems that could provide richer telemetry in crisis situations. Eventual discovery by improved technology and refined modeling. Advances in AUV endurance, synthetic aperture sonar, and better integration of drift model results could theoretically locate main wreckage in a defined box. Ocean Infinity's renewed efforts reflect that possibility,
but the success probability depends on refined target prioritization and favorable weather windows. Partial closure through new debris or corroborating data. A new debris find with confirmatory serial number forensics or discovery of acoustic records consistent with impact could shrink uncertainty and enable future targeted searches without immediate discovery of a main wreck. Such incremental gains remain valuable for families and investigators. Prolonged uncertainty but systemic improvements. If the wreck remains unfound, MH370 will still have produced constructive industry change, improved tracking standards, better emergency telemetry requirements, and a more robust private-public search ecosystem, changes that reduce the chance of repeat mysteries even if this one remains unresolved. MH370 is an uncomfortable object lesson. We have precise knockout facts, loss of transponder, military radar suggesting a turn, Inmarsat arcs, and scattered debris. But we lack the decisive machine-level evidence that recorders provide. That gap is why the flight became a decade-long problem for investigators, families, and the industry. The search and the debate reshaped expectations about tracking, recovery, and the economics of deep ocean searches. And until the main wreckage and recorders are found, the definitive why remains outside our reach. Journalistic disclaimer. This episode is grounded in official reports, scientific drift modeling, and contemporary reporting. Where the public record is incomplete, we avoid speculation and we flag open questions. If you want a deep technical breakdown of the Inmarsat Doppler math, CSIRO drift modeling methods, or Ocean Infinity's AUV search tactics, tell us in the comments and we'll publish a follow-up technical episode. Remember to subscribe for more aviation content, and if you found this analysis useful, like and share it with anyone in operations, search and rescue, or aviation policy. We'll update this story as investigators or search teams publish new findings.